Something missing inside you, but you can't quite put your finger on it. Like there's this emotional emptiness that no success can fill, no compliment can touch, and no relationship can truly heal. Maybe that emptiness didn't just show up recently. Maybe it started way back when you were too young to understand what was happening, but you could already feel in your body and your heart that something hurt, something that was never named, only felt, and over time, pushed aside. A part of you still waiting to be embraced. Carl Jung called this part the inner child, a living presence within the psyche. He once said, "The child is both the future and the past of the soul, and as long as that child remains wounded, the adult you are today keeps trying to fix the present with hands still tied to the past." That's why in this video, we're getting straight to the point. No fluff, no detours. We're going to talk about a method that's deep, symbolic, and grounded in reality, the Jungian approach to healing the inner child, and why it's such a powerful key to transforming the way you relate to your own story and to yourself. And at the end of this video, I'll share a simple yet profound practice to help you break the cycle of invisible pain. It's an exercise that's been a turning point for many people here on the channel, and if you've made it this far, maybe it's your time too. If this topic stirs something in you, I strongly recommend you check out our videos on the mother wound and the father wound, because here we're after deep healing. And more often than not, the pain of the inner child is deeply intertwined with those other absences. So once you finish this video, take a look at the links in the description and the cards above. It might be just what you need to keep walking this path back to yourself. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. The inner child never disappeared. Your forgotten inner child never disappeared. She stayed right there inside you, trying to find space to exist, even if disguised as anxiety, guilt, or misplaced anger. Sometimes she shows up when you feel rejected for no clear reason, when you overreact to something small, when you freeze even though you know what to do. It's not overreacting. It's emotional memory. It's the past leaking into the now, because it was never truly seen. Carl Jung referred to this inner presence as the child archetype, a deep universal symbol representing both the most vulnerable part of the psyche and its purest potential for renewal. The inner child is where our spontaneity, curiosity, creativity, and lightness live, but it's also where the trauma lives, the abandonment, the emotional exclusion, the same part that learned to hide just to avoid being rejected. Jung said the unconscious is timeless, and that the child we once were still lives within us. When that wounded part is ignored, it shows up without warning, in sudden rage, irrational fear of being seen, in constant shame over making mistakes. It also shows up in silence, in self-abandonment, in the guilt of not being what others expected of you. This is a core idea in depth psychology. A wounded inner child keeps the self from emerging. And the self to Jung is the living center of the psyche. It's who you really are beneath all the masks. When the inner child is forgotten or suppressed, the self stays hidden and life loses its depth, its meaning. Caring for that child isn't just another exercise. It's a practice of reconnecting with your very source. Because as long as you keep ignoring that part of you, you'll keep living fragmented, reactive, always trying to prove your worth. But when you stop and truly listen to what that child has to say, something starts to shift, not just emotionally, but physically, in how you walk, how you look at the world, how you take up space in it. That part of you doesn't want to be fixed, doesn't want advice. It wants to be heard, to be seen, to know that now there's someone who can protect it, and that someone is you. Recognizing the patterns. Maybe you've never heard the term inner child, but you feel her every day. That perfectionism that makes you double-check everything, even when it's already good enough. That inner voice that tells you should have done more, even after giving it your all. That pressure wasn't born with you. It was learned. It was shaped somewhere along the way where you came to believe you'd only be worthy if you were flawless. And the fear of rejection. That's an old echo too. It's not just fear of losing someone. It's fear of being forgotten, left behind, seen as disposable. So you try to control everything, predict everything, please everyone, and still you feel like it could all fall apart at any moment. That feeling of not being good enough has turned into a shadow that quietly follows you around. People may compliment you, but you don't believe them. You think they're just being nice, or maybe they're mistaken. Deep down, something still whispers that you'll never quite measure up, that no matter how hard you try, something will always be missing. The need for approval has become part of how you navigate the world. You overthink what others might think. You weigh your words, hide your feelings, hold back tears, suppress anger. Because deep down, you feel like you only deserve love when you're pleasing, when you're not a burden, when you fit the mold. And when you do try to set boundaries, something collapses inside you. Feel guilty just for saying no, as if taking care of yourself was some kind of cruelty. More often than not, you accept what hurts you just to avoid disappointing anyone, and end up disappointed in yourself again for putting yourself last. Maybe you smile even when you're falling apart. Maybe you say, "I'm fine," while carrying the weight of the world. Maybe you tell yourself you're being dramatic, too sensitive. But what you feel is real. These aren't made-up stories. They're traces of the child you once were, the one still waiting to be seen. Tell me honestly, do you see yourself in any of this? Because I did for a long time. I spent years thinking it was just my personality, until the day I finally stopped and looked this pain in the eye. And only then did I realize it wasn't weakness. It was the child in me asking for help, the only way she knew how. Understanding the wounds. When we talk about emotional wounds, we often think only of the obvious pain. But some wounds don't bleed on the outside, and that makes them even harder to recognize. Some scream, others stay silent, but all of them leave deep marks. These wounds can generally be divided into two types: active wounds and subtle wounds. Active wounds are easier to identify. They come from clear, visible pain, moments etched into memory and body, times when a child was met with harsh discipline or intense reactions at the very moments they needed comfort and safety. You might remember moments like these, being punished way out of proportion. Sometimes it only took a look or a shift in tone for you to know it wasn't safe to be yourself. These experiences cut deep. The child who lives through them learns to anticipate others' moves, to stay on high alert. She develops an internal radar. Any mistake could have consequences. So she gets quiet, she hardens, she puts on armor, and with time she forgets what it was like to live without fear of messing up. In this kind of environment, the child learns that the world is dangerous, that everything must be monitored, that feeling is risky, and so she starts to live in survival mode, even long after the actual danger is gone. But there's another kind of wound, just as painful, sometimes even more, that can go unnoticed for years: the subtle wound. It grows in what looks like a normal home, a place with stability, present parents, a steady routine. What was missing wasn't structure, it was emotional presence. These are families where no one yells, but no one truly listens either. There's food on the table, but no warmth in the eyes. Everything looks fine, but the child constantly feels like she's doing something wrong. This wound forms when care comes with conditions, when love is linked to performance, when there's constant comparison, critiques disguised as advice, or silences that chill. Parents who say, "I love you," but only when the child gets it right. Who hug, but stiffly. Who hear, but don't really listen. Not all pain comes from shouting. Some comes from quiet absences, the ones that quietly corrode. The look that never came, the hug that never lasted, the "I'm proud of you" that was never said. A child raised in that kind of space learns to shrink, to silence herself, to settle for the bare minimum. And later, she doesn't understand why the emptiness feels so heavy, why mistakes feel so shameful, why trust is so hard to give. The cruelest thing about the subtle wound is how confusing it is. You grow up not understanding why it hurts. After all, no one hit me, no one left. It wasn't that bad. And that's exactly when many people begin to invalidate their own story. They tell themselves they're overreacting, that they have no right to feel this pain. But they do. The body knows, the heart knows, the child inside still remembers. Both wounds, the active and the subtle, lead to the same result: a fracture in your sense of worth, a lingering feeling of not belonging, of being fundamentally wrong, even when you don't know why. Recognizing this kind of pain is the first step to changing how you treat yourself, because as long as it goes unnamed, it keeps running the show from behind your choices, behaviors, and relationships. The masks we wear faced with pain, the psyche adapts. And one of its first survival tools is to create a mask, a version of you shaped not by your true essence, but by the need to be accepted. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, a construct that helps the child survive in the world. It's the identity you learn to wear to please, to belong, to stay out of the way. And it can take many forms. Maybe you became the perfect child, never a problem, straight-A student, never cried, or the always smiling girl who helped everyone and was never too much, or the strong adult, the fixer, the one who silently holds it all together. The persona adapts to the environment, and it does it well. The problem is, the mask that once protected you is now holding you back, because when you identify too deeply with it, you forget who you are underneath. You act like everything's fine even when you're falling apart. You say yes to avoid conflict, when every fiber in you is screaming no. You compliment when you want to confront, smile when you want to disappear. The persona becomes an emotional armor. It keeps judgment at bay, but also blocks real connection. It keeps you functioning, but distant from others, and worse, from yourself. And the longer you live behind that mask, the harder it becomes to tell the difference between your true desires and your conditioned responses, between your choices and your programming. Your spontaneity starts to fade. Your authenticity slips away. Your voice wavers. Your courage shrinks. Your light dims. The worst part? You start to believe that this edited version of you is all you have to offer. But deep inside, the child is still there, still waiting, still feeling. The mask isn't the enemy. The danger is when it becomes your only identity, because behind it, there's someone still trying to be seen, not for what they do, but for who they are. The exiled child. To make the mask work, something had to be left behind. You can't be the perfect child and express anger. You can't be the people-pleasing girl and still show sadness, fear, or doubt. So you began silencing parts of yourself, one by one, until only what was acceptable remained. The young ego, unknowingly, began sacrificing emotions to preserve connection, and that's not a conscious choice, it's survival instinct. The child learns fast. Showing too much might push love away. So she hides, adapts, shrinks herself to keep belonging. You learned not to feel just so you could keep functioning. You learned that crying meant weakness, that saying "I'm scared" was dramatic, that expressing pain was being a burden. So you became someone who could play the role, but felt more and more disconnected from your own truth. It's like you exiled that child inside you, not because she was weak, but because she was too much for what others expected you to be. And that exile didn't happen all at once. It happened gradually. Every time you heard "stop crying," every time you silenced yourself to avoid conflict, every time you felt but couldn't express, that child wasn't destroyed. She was forgotten, locked away deep inside, along with everything spontaneous, creative, sensitive, instinctive. She's still there, waiting. And the cruelest part is that, over time, you started believing she wasn't even part of you anymore. But the truth is, as long as that child remains locked away, something inside you stays incomplete, because she holds exactly what's missing: the root of your vitality, your genuine joy, your sense of wholeness. She is the bridge between the version of you that had to survive and the one you were born to be. Life moves on. You grow, work, build relationships, but some part of you always feels absent, like you're living with half a soul. That half is still there, in the place where you stopped feeling. Even when we try to forget the pain, the unconscious doesn't forget. It doesn't file it away. It replays it, because what isn't resolved doesn't disappear. It returns in cycles, in behaviors, in people who, without realizing it, touch the exact wound that never healed. The repetition compulsion. You may think you're choosing your relationships with awareness, but more often than not, it's the wounded child choosing. And she's not just looking for love. She's trying to fix the past. That's why you fall for people who don't listen, who ignore you, who demand everything and give so little. Deep down, your psyche is trying to relive the old pain, hoping that this time the ending will be different. Carl Jung called this the symbolic repetition compulsion, an unconscious urge to recreate the trauma, as if you're still the child facing the same absence, only now trying to win, trying for the 100th time to finally get what never came: the gaze, the warmth, the validation. But it comes at a steep price, because you give too much, you tolerate too much, you erase yourself all over again. You enter relationships that hurt more than they heal, yet somehow they feel familiar. And they are, because they replicate the exact feeling you knew in childhood, trying to earn love. And as long as that cycle goes unrecognized, it keeps playing out in your bonds, your reactions, your silences. You may say, I have terrible taste. I only attract people who hurt me. I don't know how to love right. But something else is happening. It's your inner child trying to make it work with someone who carries the same emptiness you came from. Breaking that cycle starts with recognizing you're not there anymore. There's an adult here now who can choose differently. But that choice only becomes real when you understand where the pain comes from and why, to this day, it still drives your steps. The letter to your inner child. Until now, you've seen the pain, traced its roots, and realized how it still echoes in the present. Now it's time to do something for that forgotten part, something symbolic, but profoundly real. And the most powerful step you can take now is to write a letter to the child you once were. This practice has appeared before on the channel, in our videos about the father wound and the mother wound. Since then, hundreds of people have shared their stories, moving stories, people who lived with an unnamed emptiness and finally understood where it came from when they wrote that letter. People who unearthed buried memories, cried like they hadn't in years, but who, for the first time, felt like they were truly taking care of themselves. Writing this letter isn't just an emotional task. It's a gesture of reunion, a ritual of reconnection, because your inner child is still there, still feeling, still waiting, still silently asking, will anyone ever truly see me? So write. Sit down with pen and paper, or wherever feels right, but make it a moment just for you without distractions. Close your eyes for a few seconds and picture yourself at the age you are now, sitting across from the child you once were. Maybe she's quiet, scared. Maybe she's curled up, sad, angry. That's okay. Just approach gently, respectfully, and say what she most needed to hear. Tell her she wasn't wrong for feeling so much, that she wasn't weak for crying, that she wasn't too much or too sensitive or strange. Tell her it wasn't her fault that love never came, that she didn't deserve the silence, the neglect, the criticism. Tell her there's someone by her side now, that she's safe, and that you, the adult, are here to protect her. Don't overthink it. Don't try to organize everything. Write as if she were right there in front of you. Let whatever needs to come, come. It can be messy. It can be intense. It can be light. Just write. Write with honesty. This letter isn't meant to be perfect. It's meant to be yours. When you finish, read it out loud. If you can, do it in front of a mirror. Look yourself in the eyes. And then burn it, safely, of course, but burn it, because it matters. Fire is a symbol of purification, of endings and beginnings. With this gesture, you're saying, I'm coming back. I'm reconnecting. I won't leave this child alone anymore. It might seem simple, but it speaks directly to the unconscious. And that's why it transforms. Additional healing practices. But the letter is only the beginning. There are other practices that take this reconnection with the inner child even deeper. Techniques used by therapists in approaches like Jungian psychology, integrative psychotherapy, schema therapy, compassion-focused therapy, and even trauma-informed CBT, all clinically grounded, all with one shared goal, to help you reclaim the parts of yourself that were left behind. One of these practices is called the empty chair technique. Here's how it works. You sit facing an empty chair, take a deep breath, and imagine the child you once were sitting there. You might picture yourself at 5, 6, 7 years old. Look at her with the eyes you have today, with the maturity you carry now, and speak. Say what you always needed to say. Maybe it's love, maybe it's sorrow, maybe it's anger. Everything is valid. Let the emotion move through your body. Let that child finally hear what she was waiting for. And if you feel ready, switch seats. Sit in the child's chair and let her respond. This symbolic exchange can unlock parts of you that have been silent for years. Another powerful practice is written dialogue. Grab a notebook and start a conversation between your adult self, the one who's listening, reflecting, seeking, and the child who got left behind. Let her speak too. Ask what she felt, what she needed. Write her answers as if they're coming from her. You might be surprised at what surfaces, because the unconscious speaks, and when given space, it reveals truths that may have been waiting for decades. There's also archetypal meditation, a tool used in Jungian therapy that anyone can try. Close your eyes, breathe, and visualize a child before you. Not the wounded one, but the intact one. Radiant, alive, the part of you that has never been broken. This is the divine child, as Jung called it, the one who holds your essence untouched by trauma. See her smiling at you, trusting you, recognizing you. That symbolic image, even if imagined, acts like a remedy to the unconscious, because it begins to replace the distorted self-image you've carried with one that's whole, loving, and true. And if you want to go further on this path, with more clarity and consistency, I've prepared something special, a 21-day ebook of practices inspired by Carl Jung's teachings. Small steps, each one designed to lead you back to yourself. The link is pinned in the first comment. If it feels right for you, save it and start today. But none of these practices replace professional therapy. If this journey feels too heavy to walk alone, reach out for support. Psychotherapists grounded in analytical psychology, integrative therapists, or professionals specializing in childhood trauma and self-image work, they can walk this road with you. And walking together, when it comes to emotional healing, is a way of holding space for the child who once had to walk alone. Becoming your own protector. You're no longer that defenseless child. And even if part of you still feels small sometimes, there is now someone who can protect, care, and choose. That someone is you. You're not going to abandon yourself anymore. You won't shrink to fit or fade away to be loved. You can, with simple, steady steps, become the adult that child so badly needed. One who listens, who doesn't judge, who doesn't demand perfection in order to love. An adult who chooses not to repeat old wounds, but to create a different story. That's the power that awakens when you stop waiting for the past to change and decide to become the answer your heart's been longing for. It's not about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about owning the present, taking your story in your hands, all of it, and walking forward with dignity, with presence, with awareness. Jung said, "The unconscious transforms when it is seen with truth." And the truth is this: everything you once lacked, you already carry within you. You can be presence where there was absence, steadiness where there was chaos, comfort where there was silence. That's not self-help fantasy. That's emotional maturity. You might still hear echoes of the old pain, you might still react the old way sometimes, but now there's space between the trigger and the response. There's a pause where you can breathe, where you can choose differently. That pause, that's where freedom begins. Your inner child doesn't need to drive the car anymore, but she doesn't have to stay locked in the back seat either. She can sit beside you. She can trust that this time, the driver knows the way, knows what they want, knows that they don't have to earn love because they finally understand they were worthy of it all along. The homecoming healing. The inner child isn't about rewriting the past. It's about rebuilding right here, right now, a relationship with who you were and who you still are deep down. That child never stopped existing. She just waited. Waited for someone to look at her without fear, without judgment, without rushing. Someone able to say, "I see you. I feel what you felt, and you're not alone anymore." Through this video, maybe you realized how many years you've spent trying to live up to others' expectations, trying to fit into molds that were never made for you, trying to make up for love you didn't receive with achievements, with effort, with silence. Maybe you've worn so many versions of yourself, you forgot what it felt like to just be you. And now that all of this has come to light, now that you've named the pain, heard your inner child, started to care for her with presence, something new is taking shape. It's not instant, it's not linear, but it's real. It's a kind of homecoming, not to repeat, but to reclaim, to reorganize, to recognize yourself again. Because when you start treating yourself with truth, with compassion and strength at the same time, something inside you shifts. You stop trying to prove your worth and start truly inhabiting who you are, all of you, with your scars and your power, with your light and your shadow, whole. And in that state of wholeness, life begins to change too. The world stops being a courtroom of judgment, comparison, and demands. It starts looking more like fertile ground where you can plant presence, connection, meaning, where you no longer have to chase love because you learn to generate it within. And this love, unlike the conditional love you once knew, is rooted. It doesn't demand performance, it doesn't vanish when you slip, it doesn't require perfection, only presence. That's why liberation, in the end, is a return to self. You no longer have to ignore your story or carry alone the weight of unprocessed pain. You can stop, you can breathe, you can choose a new way of relating to yourself, to others, to life. And if this message touched your inner child, leave a comment below. I choose to embrace my inner child. That sentence is more than a comment. It's a commitment. It's the first step toward breaking the cycle of emotional abandonment. And if this content helped you, and you'd like to support the channel in a more direct way, consider clicking the thanks button below. Even the smallest contribution makes a real difference. It's what allows us to keep creating content like this, with depth, with heart, with emotional responsibility. It's what helps this message reach more people, others who, like you, are ready to come home to themselves. Thank you for being here, for listening with an open heart, and for giving that ancient, still alive part of you the chance to finally be seen.